Good evening, everybody, and welcome again to the Borderline Podcast with me, your host, Andrew Willits. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into the American episodes. For those of you who have listened already, I hope you've really enjoyed them. It was a brilliant time speaking with Chase and Ashley. And just if they're listening to this little intro, thank you so much again for coming on the show. It was a pleasure to host. And tonight, I've got another pleasure. It is Sarah Wellband that's coming on the podcast tonight. She works with Remedial Hypnosis. There's so much information in this episode. It's also Sarah's first ever podcast, which you'll find quite unbelievable given just how confident, intellectual, educational, and just how calming. That's the one thing that I really got from her. She was just such a calming person to speak to, and it was a brilliant conversation. So much information. Like I say, check out the description after this episode. All of her links to her pages or social medias are going to be in the description below. And if you would like to get in contact with her, like she was saying in this episode, she does offer consultations and to speak a little bit more about hypnosis, if this would be a nice treatment therapy route for you. So have a little listen and decide for yourself, guys. Enjoy. Thank you so much for coming onto the Borderline podcast. How are you doing tonight?
I'm very well, thank you, Andrew, and thank you very much for having me on the show.
It's my pleasure. And like I say, I understand this is your first podcast, and I honestly mean it when I say it. It's really an honor to have you on the show. And having obviously telling you about your expertise in remedial hypnosis, I think it's going to make for a brilliant episode. Like I said before, I had a hypnotherapist on just the other week. There was a little bit of connection issues, so I never really got the full feel like I do during the episodes that I'm learning at the same time. So a lot of my regular listeners obviously won't know who Sarah Wellband is. For those, could you just give a little brief introduction, a little soft intro to who you are and a little bit of your history and why the universe has decided to cross our paths this evening?
Of course, Andrew, yes. So I've had quite a diverse history. Grew up in deepest Lincolnshire, spent the first few years of my career in catering, and then I moved to London and became a mortgage broker. And I did that for 8 years in London, and then I moved to Dublin and spent another 11 years doing the same thing. Luckily, I was very fortunate to work for two very responsible, very ethical companies, both in London and in Dublin. And although people think mortgages are a financial instrument, it's much more about people. So throughout my career, I've always worked with people, watched people, tried to understand why they're thinking the way they are, what makes them behave the way that they do. And I just find people really interesting. So in 2007, I decided to have a little bit of a break, and I loaded all my belongings and my dog into the back of a van. Well, the dog was in the front of the van with me, and moved over here to Portugal. I'd never been here before, apart from a week's holiday, which I'd won in a radio competition. So it was very much a leap into the dark, but I've now been here 17 years and I love it. It's an amazing country. So for a couple of years, I took a break, and then I met my partner, and I happened to mention that I'd always wanted a horse. So he said, right, it's been 40 years, let's get you a horse. And of course, you get one horse and you have to then get another horse to keep the first horse company. Then you have to get a third horse in case the other two don't like each other. So to cut a long story short, we ended up at one point with 10 horses. And we were doing trail riding and riding lessons, etc. But again, I thought there had to be a different way of doing things. So in 2016, we qualified as what's called equine assisted trainers or equine assisted facilitators, which is a bit of a fancy term, but basically horses are great educators. They're great at reading body language. They use reading body language to survive. And they can actually teach people how to behave. The very simple example I will give is if you have a 500 kilo animal that doesn't speak your language, and you can persuade it to walk alongside you without any accoutrements, without any ropes or whips or anything else, it just wants to walk alongside you because you've developed a relationship of trust and respect, then you can do the same with people. And it's amazing the effect it can have on people. And again, watching people and how they interacted with the horses, I just wanted to delve more into the human condition, the human mind. So COVID came along, and of course we had to put everything on hold. And I started studying CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, just online at home. And I really enjoyed that. It made a lot of sense. And I qualified up to level 4. And I started working with clients. But the problem is CBT is great. It works if it's delivered correctly, if people understand it. But there are two issues. One, it does have to be delivered correctly. And secondly, the person receiving it has to do an awful lot of homework. You have to do a lot of self-study, self-analysis, and an hour a week with a CBT counselor therapist is not going to do any good unless the person has got the time and commitment and willingness to put the time in themselves. And that's often why they seek therapy, because they don't have those resources. So as part of my my studying, I watched a TED Talk by a guy called Tim Box, and it's called How Not to Be Anxious About Anxiety. And it was an absolutely fascinating TED Talk, and I looked him up and found out what he did, which he calls mind coaching or remedial hypnosis. And I got in touch with him and started training. So I qualified in January 2021, so just over 3 years ago. And then the following year, I did a further course to be a workshop practitioner, which means I can do group practitioners. So I've been working in this role now for 3 years. Absolutely love it. It's amazing the way that you can change people's lives in 3 or 4 sessions. It always surprises the life out of them. It doesn't surprise me necessarily anymore, but it's incredibly effective, and it can be absolutely life-changing. So
Yeah,
that's who
absolutely.
I am.
Yeah, that was really well, nicely put. I really liked how you spoke about obviously the behavior between animals and humans. A little bit of background on myself is I'm actually animal biologist by training, by
Okay.
education, and now
Oh,
I'm
wow.
obsessed with human behavior. So I can definitely see how those two align. And I massively agree on what you're saying about CBT. When I first started my anxiety, my mental health journey, that was the very first thing that was offered to me when I first started. I thought it was brilliant because it was my first course of treatment, and your first course of treatment is always, you always feel that you're getting a good benefit out of that because you're making a small change in your life. But
Yeah.
very quickly, I started to realize CBT just was not doing it for me. It was good to practice the breathing techniques. It was good to become more self-aware, but I totally agree with what you're saying. It's just sometimes not enough.
No,
So obviously, then you turn to remedial hypnosis. So could you just tell us a little bit about remedial hypnosis and obviously what the main difference is that between typical types of other types of hypnosis, I should say?
of course, yes. So the traditional method, if you like, is hypnotherapy. And in hypnotherapy, what will happen is you start with a pre-talk, a consultation to find out what the person wants to change, what the issues are. And then the hypnotherapist will typically take them through it's called a progressive muscle relaxation to get them relaxed from tips of the top of the head to the tips of the toes. We'll then put them into a trance by saying you'll go deeper and deeper. And then generally they will deliver insights or it's often a script. Some people don't use scripts, but a lot of people do use scripts to, what's the word I'm looking for? To suggest a change of behavior, a change of
Yeah.
a pattern of thought, a change of stop a bad habit, whatever. And then the hypnotherapist will bring the person out of the trance, and that's the end of the session. That's a very quick synopsis of what's happened. Two problems there. One, the actually getting into the trance bit and coming out of it is very long-winded. And whilst it's nice and relaxing for the client, for the hypnotherapist, it's quite boring to be, putting somebody into a trance. And the other thing is it's very one-sided. So effectively, you've got a person in an armchair or on a chaise longue or whatever, and they're effectively not able to communicate. They're not asleep, but they're in a very deep relaxation. So what I do is I talk to the client to start with. I always start with a free consultation. Always start with an hour, 90 minutes to make sure, one, I can help the person, and two, that this method's right for them. Because if it isn't, it's wasting my time and their money, and that's not good for either of us. So we start with outlining the problem. I then check to make sure that their subconscious mind is willing and able to communicate. Now, by that I mean, if you don't mind, I'll give you an analogy of how the mind works to explain how that works. So, if you imagine your mind is like a ship, and the conscious, rational, logical part of your mind is the captain. So the captain's on the ship. On the deck, you've got your crew hands, your waiters and your cleaners and everything else. They're best described as your automatic actions, your walking, talking, driving, peeling potatoes, whatever, all of the things that we do without necessarily thinking about them. So the captain can see the deck crew, but just lets them carry on with stuff, unless you're going to walk off a curb or cut your thumb off or whatever, and the captain will go, whoa, hang on, stop. So that's fairly straightforward. Underneath the deck, however, you've got the engine room, and that's your subconscious mind. Now, your subconscious mind is in charge of your imagination, your memories, your creativity, but most of all, your emotions. Okay, so that's what drives the way that you feel, the emotions that you feel when you do something. And when you say there's a part of me that thinks this, or there's a bit of me that thinks no, I shouldn't, that's the part of your subconscious. That's the bit of you that's saying, not sure about that. So to continue with the ship analogy, for the first 10 to 12 years of your life, there's no captain on board, because when we're born, we are all subconscious. We don't have the ability to think consciously. We don't have the ability to decide whether things are true or not. We just absorb information. So the crew for that first part of your life, the most important part of your life, which is when you absorb more information than any other time, there's no captain. So all they're doing is trying to keep the ship afloat, trying to keep you safe, trying to keep you happy. And during that time, you might, the crew, your mind might devise a strategy which makes sense at that time. For example, if daddy shouts, you might learn that, okay, I need to keep quiet when somebody else is raising their voice because it keeps me safe. Then as you get older, you may well find that you are incapable of getting into debates, or the sound of a man shouting is frightening to you, even though you're quite old enough and able enough to handle that type of conversation as an adult. That bit of your subconscious is going, oh no, that's scary. Let's back off from here. Another really good example is food. When you're little, food is often a reward, a bribe, something that soothes you. You know, you're upset, so you give them some sweets. You win a race and you give them an ice cream. You know, that's always a reward. And for a child, that's really deeply built in there. When you get older and you find that you're reaching for the biscuits because you're upset, you're rewarding yourself with chocolate, with whatever, and people talk obviously about emotional eating, and that's exactly where it comes from. It's that bit of your inner child, your crew going, I remember this, we're unhappy. Let's have some chocolate. Now, for the child, that was a good strategy because it worked. For the adult, all it's doing is giving you a moment of pleasure against a lifetime of happiness, because once you eat that chocolate, a lot of people, if they've got weight problems, they'll be really angry with themselves. So the strategy of a child is not the strategy of the adult. So that's the background as to how the mind works. So what we want to do, and the reason why CBT and a lot of other talking therapies aren't as successful as they could be, is that the therapist and the client are talking with their logical minds. They're not going down into the subconscious, which is where the problems lie. People say, logically, I know I shouldn't be afraid of spiders. Spider's not going to hurt me. But there's a part of the subconscious went, hang on, Granny screamed when she saw a spider. Granny must always be right. Therefore, we've got to have a fear of spiders. And I'm not taking any of that rubbish from you about spiders are okay. So what we need to do is talk to that part of the subconscious. We call it parts therapy. And what I will do is quite literally ask the subconscious to move a finger. So I'll have the clients put their hands on a cushion or on somewhere where I can see them if we're on Zoom, which we mainly are. And I'll simply say to the subconscious, could you move a finger or a thumb? Now, if they go like this, I go, hang on, you're doing that consciously. And they go, yes, you told me to move a finger. I said, no, conscious mind can go and play with the fairies for a while. We want to talk to the subconscious. So what will happen is you'll get a tiny little movement of a finger. And I'm not going to swear, but when the client says, wow, that's weird, I didn't do that, then I know I'm talking to the subconscious. Because if you think about it, the subconscious is moving our bodies all the time. If you knocked over your cup of water next to you at the moment, your subconscious would grab it before your conscious mind had even registered the fact it was falling. So the subconscious doesn't know until this point, but quickly realizes that they can actually communicate directly, independently of the conscious mind. So what I will then do is quite simply ask the part of the subconscious that's blocking the client's happiness or using a strategy that is no longer helpful to come forward, and I simply say, did you know that what you're doing, you've been doing it great because you were always very kind to the subconscious. They're always trying to do the right thing. But what you're doing isn't working anymore and it's not helpful. And would you mind just stop doing it? And 9 times out of 10, the subconscious go, oh, okay, yeah, I'll stop. And it is very often literally as simple as that. You're doing this, you don't need to do it anymore, it's not being helpful anymore, it's not making the person happy, which is, don't forget, the subconscious is all about happiness and safety. And it goes, oh, all right. And you just say, can you please change the thought patterns? Yep, done. And the client opens their eyes, and they normally have their eyes closed, although they're awake, and goes, whoa, what's going on there? Okay, Andrew, the dogs have just started barking. Can we just...
It's
really
okay.
want
I
to
can
edit
hear
that
them.
out?
It's fine. Just keep on going. It's
All right.
yeah. I'll
Okay.
just scrub down
Okay.
the sound.
All
Don't
right.
worry.
Okay. Okay. That's all right. They're just being moved, dragged out of the way. So that, in a nutshell, is that. So we it's not just one session. So we do the introductory, the initial consultation, and during that initial consultation, I always test to make sure that the subconscious can communicate, because about 20% of people can't, through no fault of their own. It just doesn't happen, just doesn't work. And B, to make sure that the subconscious is, to use a ship analogy, on board with making changes. And again, probably 95% of the time they are. And even if I say, will you work with me? And it goes, no, we can still work together because there will be a good reason why the subconscious is worried about changing or unsure about changing. So that, in a nutshell, is what we do. I do 3 sessions. So the 4 sessions: initial consultation, the first session, which is where we do the majority of the work, and the second and third session are basically just to reinforce the changes, make sure everything's okay, everything's working okay. In the last session, I actually teach people how to do the changes themselves, how to speak to their own subconscious so that they don't need to come back to me, which is a bit strange. But actually, once they know the technique, they can say, okay, I'm not very happy about this, and they can literally chat to their own subconscious. It's brilliant.
Wow, that is fascinating. Really is fascinating, and I absolutely love the ship analogy and the way that you explained that. It really helps relate in a nice, easy sense of exactly how that would be operating inside the mind. But it's so true. I'm a big I talk about all the time meditation, really deep states of meditation, long sessions to try and I only personally only think that I can make progress with my mental health, depression and whatnot when I really I call it learning a little bit more about myself, because you sometimes get a message of surprise when you meditate, and it sometimes makes sense. And for me, that's my subconscious saying, here's a little hand, this is what you're after. And for me, it's just that missing link, just to actually clarify it. So that must 4 sessions is not a lot of time. That must really surprise a lot of the patients and clients that you work with, of just how fast this approach can work, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the way to explain it again is that the conscious mind is always going through options, going through nuances, and thinking deeply, and trying to work stuff out. Again, subconscious is much more childlike, is much more, this is right, this is wrong, I'll do this, I'll do that. There's generally very little in the way of negotiation. They just go, okay, I didn't realize that what I'm doing used to work, but I don't need to do it anymore. Another really good example is public speaking, which is a big phobia of a lot of people. And that often starts maybe early teens, when your social group is the strongest thing, it's the most important thing in your life. If you get up in class and do a speech and make a mess of it, and you get laughed at or ostracized, or basically it was a horrible experience, there'll be part of your subconscious that just goes, sod that, I'm never doing that again. That was awful. I'm going to protect you by making sure that you are never in that position again. So then when you are in your first job and the boss says you can do a presentation, that part of the subconscious goes, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. We hated it last time. We're not doing it again. And the mind is very strong. It can take your voice away. It can make you feel so sick that you actually have to call in sick. It will do literally whatever is necessary, not to harm your job prospects, but to keep you safe from that thing that was so awful the first time. And that's a really good example of a strategy that was useful one time, but now is redundant and is actively holding us back.
True, because in a nutshell, that is what anxiety is really doing. It's protecting us. It's inhibiting that fight or flight response. So we make a decision, so we always feel safe. It's protected, or we're always meant to be physically safe, I should say, not feel safe, because you don't feel safe during the middle of a panic attack. But yeah, I guess you know where I'm going with there. But so what kind of conditions can remedial hypnosis really kind of key in and target to help people?
I mean, the list is incredibly long, but anxiety is a huge thing, and I do want to talk about anxiety in a few minutes, because it is probably the bulk of most hypnotherapist and hypnosis workers' caseload. Trauma, PTSD, weight loss, pain management, phobias, teeth grinding, smoking. Basically, we're born. A human is born with two inbuilt fears. One, the fear of being dropped, and secondly, the fear of loud noises. Anything else that we dislike or fear or whatever, we've learnt along the way, and especially in that key 10-year period. And anything the mind can learn, the mind can unlearn. So anything that you say, well, were you born with that? And they go, no, my granny was very anxious, or my mum was really anxious about health, something like that. Of course, you picked it up, you learned it, that was a natural way to be, but you can unlearn it. So I've talked to a bladder that kept waking a person up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I said, look, you don't need to do that anymore. And it was actually a volunteer here on the farm, and she came in the next day and she said, that's the first time in years that I haven't gotten up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
Travel sickness, fear of flying, spiders is often a big one, especially out here in the countryside. But yeah, but basically anything that you've developed, you can unlearn it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And also, just to wind back just a little bit, when you're saying how the brain can really make you feel physical pain, that's something that I personally try and raise a lot of awareness for when I'm speaking about my own mental health conditions, is that they can be painful, not in the sense of getting poked with a hot cattle prod, painful, but painful nonetheless. It's
Yep.
subjective to yourself, and that pain's hurting. And it's so true. And obviously, you want to focus on a little bit of anxiety. That's what the show's all about. So if you want to take it away and talk about anxiety, I'll let you lead.
Sure. And just touching on pain for a moment, hypnosis was used. Was it the First World War or Second World War? Possibly both, when there was no anesthetics available. And there's a guy called Dave Ellman, who in the 60s did a lot of hypnosis with dental patients. And I've actually, I've worked with pain. And again, because pain is so debilitating, when you actually can just say to the subconscious, you don't need to do this anymore, you're redundant, and the person goes, whoa, that pain just vanished, where did it go? That's massive. But yeah, coming back to
massively.
anxiety, if I said, Andrew, that I could stop you feeling any anxiety at all, what would you say?
I'd say
Take
tell
away
me
your
where to sign.
anxiety. No anxiety. You see, if you didn't have anxiety,
sorry.
go ahead.
No. I just got caught up in the lag. I'll let you go and I'll edit this out.
That's okay. Okay, sorry. If there was no such thing as anxiety, if you and I didn't have anxiety, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be talking, because we wouldn't have seen any value in picking up our headphones or making the connection or getting in touch with each other in the first place. Anxiety is an emotion. It's not a disease. It's not a disorder. It's the same as happiness, fear, anger. It is an emotion, and it has a very important role. So when you leave your house in the morning and you just pat your pockets to make sure you've got your keys, that is a tiny little bit of anxiety. It's saying, Andrew, check your pockets, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to get back into your house. Anxiety is the emotion that tells you to turn your iron off before you go to bed at night. If, unlike me, you actually iron anything, I don't. Anxiety is the emotion that says you're going out on a date. Have a wash, brush your hair, get ready. So anxiety is the emotion that tells us when things are too important to ignore. And that's basically what it is. It's that little prod that says, don't forget this, do that, go to the doctor. There's something wrong with you, go to the doctor. And if you say, no, I'm not going to, it'll start to talk louder. Go to the doctor. So the first thing I'd say about anxiety is if we ignore it or try to push it down, all that will happen is that crew member, which is trying to give the captain a message, will just talk louder. And will just talk louder and louder and say, you are not listening to me. You need to pay attention to this. And that's when people go, I'm trying to forget about this thing that I need to do or this bill that I need to pay. And it just keeps coming back, coming back. Well, that's because anxiety is doing its job. Now, that's fine if anxiety tells you to do something or to not forget to do something or whatever, and you do it, then on a scale of 0, which is nothing, and 10, which is complete panic, you should be bubbling about a 1 or 2. The problem is that when you start to get up to the 5s and 6s or worse, it becomes debilitating. And that can happen for several reasons. One, if anxiety is telling you to do something that you can't do. So, for example, you need to pay that bill. I don't have the money. You need to pay that bill. I don't have the money. So that's when anxiety can become, it's not being helpful anymore. Or if anxiety is telling you something that's incorrect. And the analogy we use here is if you have a child and the child starts screaming in the middle of the night, Mum, 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 there's a monster under my bed. You don't run into the room, grab the child in your arms, run out into the street, calling the army and the police saying there's a monster in my house. No, you say to the child, it's all right. Mum's here, Dad's here. There's no monster. It's okay. Because again, anxiety doesn't have the intellect that the conscious mind does. The subconscious doesn't have the intellect that the conscious mind has. So it can get things wrong. It can say, don't walk next to that cliff, or don't do this, don't do that. And you can say, actually, no, I'm the adult here. I'm in charge. That was scary when I was little. It's okay, I've got this. And 9 times out of 10, anxiety will go, oh, okay, then you're in charge. And the other thing that harks back to that original TED talk that I saw is being anxious about anxiety. A lot of people wake up in the morning and go, where's my anxiety? They will start scanning themselves for anxiety. How anxious do I feel today? And of course, what's that? That's them informing their minds that there's something to be anxious about. So again, a visual thing here. Imagine meerkats, lovely little meerkats, not the ones on the advert, but actual meerkats standing up on their hind legs and scanning the horizon for threats, for danger. And that's all they do all day. Now imagine if that's your anxiety, how tiring that is. How you can get nothing else done because all that you're doing is all the time scanning for threats, scanning for danger. When danger, as Lerman said in the sunscreen song, it's the thing that hits you at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's that phone call at 4 o'clock in the morning that you were never expecting. It's probably a little bit too old for you, but
no, that's really weird that you've mentioned that song.
Yeah, I've actually got it framed up in my consulting room.
You need to go back. You mentioned before we went on air that you'd listened to a couple of episodes. You need to go listen to the guest episode with James Gaffney. He's the first person that introduced me to that song, and it was only last week I then passed that song on to somebody else. So yeah, it really must.
Really?
It really does stand up to the age of time. Yeah, big time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's 4 minutes of pure therapy. If nothing else, that's if people just download the lyrics and read them, they are just brilliant. But yeah, so getting anxious about anxiety, and so you've got the meerkats and they're forever looking at, and what I can do is say to the subconscious, look guys, you're not helping. you need to dial this down. You need to just relax. You just need to, the person, Andrew, for example, is perfectly capable of looking after himself. He will let you know if he's being attacked by bears and we need to run, or if something, if we're being threatened, he will let you know. You do not have to be continually looking for threats. And again, the subconscious is happiness first and safety last. And that's because there are a lot of things in life that are not safe that make us very happy. Horse riding, jumping out of aeroplanes, skiing, Formula One, motor racing, lots of things that people do which are intrinsically dangerous, but it makes them very happy. So the happiness overrides the safety aspects, safety concerns. So yeah, anxiety is a great one. The other thing that I really like working with, which seems quite weird to say it, is trauma. Because trauma very often has a specific starting point. So when something traumatic happens to a person, a part of their crew, a part of their subconscious is assigned to figure out exactly what happened for the express reason of making sure it never happens again. And so that part will go, okay, what on earth happened? Now, if you can say the other driver was drunk, or I didn't realize I'd left my slippers on the stairs and that's why I fell down the stairs, or there was a rational reason, that a good explanation for the accident or the incident or whatever, then that part of the subconscious can go, okay, that's fine. We don't need to worry about it. But a lot of things are just incredibly random. Things just happen. Life just happens. Mm-hmm. Or the people or the person involved in the trauma, in cases of abuse often, isn't able or willing to explain what happened. So what the subconscious is doing is desperately trying to find a solution. It's going around in a hamster wheel, flashbacks, memories, constant thoughts. What happened? What happened? What happened? Was I responsible? Was I involved? Could I have done something different? Could I have stopped it? And that process is awful for the person concerned, and it feels like their mind is acting against them. But the mind is saying, I need to know because I need to make sure that it doesn't happen again in the future. And again, what I do is simply talk to that specific part, ask that specific part to come forward and say, look, if I gave you a jigsaw puzzle that would explain what happened, but half the pieces are missing, you would never make that picture. You would never be able to complete that picture. It's simply impossible. And there will never be an answer to this issue. You'll never find a solution. And at that point, that part of the subconscious, that crew member will just stop, because they will only keep looking for an answer if there's possible to be an answer. And if it's just one of those things, it's just one, there will never be a solution, then it goes, I will stop. And I had a client, a person who had several traumatic things happen within a very short period of time, all unconnected. But so she was getting multiple flashbacks, multiple memories, and we went through them one by one, and they were all just complete bad luck, or other people doing things that other people really shouldn't do. And she came back the next week and she said, they're still there, but it's like they've been covered in oil. And every time I reach for them, every time I try to grasp them, they just slip out of my fingers. They can't hurt me anymore. So it doesn't wipe the memory of what happened. It doesn't stop it being there, but it stops the emotional connection. Because a part of the subconscious which was triggering that emotion has said, there's no point, and all I'm doing is hurting the person by keep searching. So that is a really satisfying part of what I do, because trauma is so horrible, and it is normally incredibly easy to deal with, very quick to deal with. So that's great.
Like you say, that must be incredibly rewarding when you see the benefit of it happening first time. I was just going to ask you there. Obviously, you'd mentioned earlier a lot of your sessions are done over Zoom. Do you see any
Yes.
difference in results between online sessions versus real time sessions, or is the techniques when once applied get the same results?
It's funnily enough, it's actually easier by Zoom because people are in their own homes, they're in their own surroundings, they're more comfortable, they're in control. If at any point it's never happened to me, but if they just didn't want to proceed, they can just close the computer or hit the off button. So plus the fact from a practical point of view, I normally have dogs trying to get involved in the therapy sessions for anybody who visits me here, which is I actually had somebody once, and the dog was lying on the lap, and she was doing the finger movements on the dog. The dog was snoring on her lap. Not very professional, but neither of them seemed to mind. That was memorable.
Whatever everybody's comfortable with.
Exactly.
No,
Exactly.
that's really
So
cool. It's
yeah,
really cool that you
and
get obviously really good results over Zoom.
yes, again, because the person is awake. What normally happens, just from a practical point of view, we angle the camera down, so I can't actually see the person's face. All I'm watching is the fingers. So whether they've got their eyes open, they're watching, or whether they've drifted off. Some people, quite interestingly, sort of self-hypnose. They when I start speaking and I have this weird hypnotic voice it's really weird. I don't mean to do it, but when I'm talking to the subconscious, my voice changes. It's but yeah, they seem to just go off into their own world. Yeah,
Yeah, to be honest,
it's equal. I would say it's probably easy. And again, I'm in a very rural part of central Portugal, so there's not that many people excuse me, actually physically around here.
your soothing voice has got to be better than Chakra Man. I've got on my Spotify meditation playlist. The voice is just mind numbing. It's not helpful whatsoever.
Yeah.
um, how is obviously you live in Portugal. I'm just going to just go slightly off topic, away from hypnosis a second.
Mm.
And how is mental health viewed on continental Europe? Obviously, you've stranger to the fact that back home in Britain we call it a crisis. I spoke to, like I told you earlier, spoke to a couple of Americans last week. They named their health current affairs of mental health as a crisis. Is it as bad? Is it the same on the continent?
I to be honest, I can't speak to mental health because I've never had to use the mental health services here. I do know a friend of mine who had a crisis, and an ambulance was with him within 5 minutes. I mean, he wasn't, yeah,
Wow.
he was in quite a bad way, and he was whipped off to hospital. But in terms of general medical health, um, if I go to my local hospital, I expect to be normally seen within 30 minutes for anything that,
What?
but it's not indicative because I live in a small town and there's a big hospital. So, but really, yeah, the health service here, as much as I've had several operations, so yes, it's good. It's good.
Yeah. No, that's good. Like I say, I just like asking basically how it's kind of viewed across different
Yeah,
countries, just to form
yeah,
a picture of the globe
yeah,
of what we're working with. Um,
yeah.
so
What
sorry, I was
what
just
what I
looking
would
down my
say is
show
that
notes.
so, sorry, yeah, go
No, no,
ahead.
on you go. No, on you go, on you
Well,
go. That's
what
fine.
I
It's
would
okay. I'll just pick that up.
um what I would say is that hypnosis does have a very woo or alternative. People think of it as an alternative therapy, but actually it's been used by mainstream medicine for many years, and it's actually, I think it's IBS that it's a medically approved treatment for, because IBS is often exacerbated by anxiety. But with things like remedial hypnosis, and I trained with Tim Box using the control system, and there are lots of practitioners around in the UK and Europe and America and Australia. We all use the same technique, that there's no trance, it can be done remotely, and we all do that initial free consultation. And the best thing about that is, even if you decide not to go ahead, even if it doesn't really work for you, you'll have got more information at the end of that hour or 90 minutes than you started with. So it's not a waste of time. It's always worthwhile just having that initial conversation. And even if they say, look, this is way outside my lane, you need to go and see your doctor, at least that's one opinion, you can take it forward. Or maybe I can just say, look, yeah, this is easy, we can fix it in 3 sessions. Because a lot of people, mental health makes you feel very alone. Feeling anxious, feeling depressed, feeling scared of things. You see everybody on social media having a great time, living their best life, and you think, there's something wrong with me. And there's nothing wrong with you that can't be fixed. There may be something, there may be just a little bit of adjustment here, a little bit of kick some butt of a particular crew member who's making a nuisance of themselves, but anything that you're going through, somebody else has been through, and somebody else has found a solution. Now, I'm not saying remedial hypnosis will deal with everything, because it won't, and there are 20% of the population who just won't respond. But at least you can find out in a non-judgmental, completely confidential and free way if it will work for you.
Massively, you kind of got that thing in my stomach when you're like, when you get that topic of relation and the words that you said, that nothing's a waste of time. That's something that I really try and echo and resonate out to people, is that when you're working on yourself, even if you don't get the answers that you anticipated, that is not a waste of time, because you've still learned a little bit about yourself. And when you go on a journey of self-acceptance and self-awareness, you have to be open to the fact that you might come across bits of information that maybe you're unexpecting, maybe don't they throw up the answers that you quite envisioned, and it's just part of the process. It's part of that, is what self-acceptance is. When you talk about the crew members, Absolutely. I've been meaning to say it all the time. The coping mechanism I use with my own anxiety to separate the subconscious from the conscious is, I call my anxiety Judith. Now, I don't actually have. There's nobody in my life that I hate called Judith. I don't know how I came up with that name, but whenever Judith comes into the party, I just politely tell her, "Please leave, Judith. There's no time for you here just now." Now and then she'll come back and she'll try and raise over the top of me, like you say. She'll maybe stamp her feet a couple of times. But if I'm adamant and I'm strong enough, I can put her away for a little bit. And that's just a coping mechanism that just helps me personally so much. So remedial hypnosis actually sounds like something that would really benefit me, because I'm quite open to things like that. So yeah, like I say, it's incredibly fascinating, because like you say, it's not so much the woo woo aspect of hypnosis, but it is almost the stigma within the stigma. Is that it's not mainstream medicine, it's not Western science, it's a self-acceptance approach, and we're so put off by that. Do you ever see any patients or clients that you kind of have to talk on board a little bit more before you go into your sessions, or are they quite committed to accepting the process that they're about to go in beforehand?
Generally, once people can see their own fingers moving independently and effectively talking, they generally go, okay, this is weird, but this works. And again, I explained the whole process. If somebody decides after the initial consultation, no, this is not for me, that's absolutely fine, because it's rather like a horse and a rider. If you try and put a rider on a horse and neither of them are happy, then it's going to end up with one of them on the ground and the other one running off into the distance. So, you never force it. But just going back to the mental health thing, for me, mental health is becoming such a big industry. And by industry, we're talking money making. And there are so many different things. You must try this, you must do that, you must do this for your face, you must do this for your mind. All the answers that we have are inside ourselves, because nobody apart from you has lived even a part of the day that's inside your head. You're the only one who've gone through your own lived existence. And you're the only one that knows what you're doing and why you're doing it. You might not know now why you do what you do, but your mind does. And your mind knows exactly why it's doing these things and where it's come from. Again, sometimes people come to me and I'll say, can you remember when this started? And they won't remember. It doesn't matter, the mind remembers. The mind is like this massive filing cabinet. Just on a slightly lighter note, have you ever been in a situation where you try to remember somebody's name, or you're doing a crossword, or you're doing something, and you're thinking and thinking and thinking as hard as you can, and then something distracts you and you go off and do something else, and your crew are rifling through the filing cabinets, and all of a sudden they've popped that name or that answer to the clue, or whatever it is. They've just popped it into your brain. And you go, I was thinking for an hour trying to think of that person's name, and I've woken up with it in my head. Again, I love the idea of the crew going through the filing cabinets going, what's that name? So obviously I don't do what I do for free, so it's probably a little bit wrong of me to say it's an industry, but it does seem to be, take these pills, take these supplements, do this, do that, buy this book, do this, do that. And it is all within ourselves. It's just a matter of
massively agree with what you're saying there, about it being industrialized. I think Mark Manson's written about in his book quite a few times how, everything just now in the world is do more, have more, want more, all these things, and you're going to start feeling amazing. But actually, if you just strip them all back, you're going to find an answer to what that thing is that you really, really want more out of life. And nothing fabricated, nothing materialistic will ever give you that, other than, and deep down that's what I want, and you actually obtaining that, or even just going for it, is enough to change somebody's life, to really have an effect. And by saying that, obviously, you don't do your courses for free. I totally respect the fact that, multiple times you've said that throughout, and that you wouldn't want to charge, and that just, it's incredibly humbling to speak to somebody that has an alignment of views like that, because it's what we need. It's how I believe when we talk about mental health crisis, it's how we get out of this crisis, is from people like yourself that are offering an alternative choice that's slightly different against the norm, and will fundamentally help change people's lives. What I'll do with that is, obviously reach that part of the show, is I personally suffer from depression and anxiety wholly, and I accept that, and I'm open to speak about it. But I know that there'll be a load of people watching or listening into this podcast that maybe aren't as open. Could you tell them why remedial hypnosis might be a course for them, and how it could really help them, just by opening their mind to something a little bit different?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing I would say is that we talk about the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. They're all part of you. They're all part of you as a complete adult or a complete person. But the subconscious is hidden away. It's the engine room, under the decks. And what we want to do is basically just open that up. And what I do is as much about education as anything else, is to explain to you and help you understand how you work. Not what I want to do, not what my opinions are or what I think you should do. It's to help you make better decisions and better choices about what's best for you. And by understanding that part of you, that part of your mind is on your side, everything it's doing is trying to help you. Everything it's doing may not be for the right reasons, may be for reasons that aren't relevant anymore, but it's there to help you. And one thing I always do when I go to bed at night, I just say to my team, great day, guys. Thanks very much. You really helped me. Let's have a good night's sleep. Because if you think about it, if you have somebody working for you and you're telling them they're stupid and they're useless and they're harming you, they're not going to want to help you. If you say, guys, great job today, or we had a bit of a wobble, but it's okay, we got through, then they're much more likely to be on your side the next time. And the one last thing I would say is that for anybody having a bad day, is that your record of getting through tough days currently stands at 100%. So no matter how bad your day's been, somehow, some way, you got through it, and you're doing 100%. Well done.
So simple yet so effective. I've actually got goosebumps all over me when you said that, because it just, the penny just dropped. And I always learn something every single episode. There's always one little statement, one little line that just, it hits me full on, and I love them moments. Sarah, you've been outstanding for your first podcast. I really, I'm having a hard
Thank
time
you.
believing that this is your first podcast. You're a natural at this.
Thank you
I
so much,
just
Andrew.
obviously
That's
say,
really kind of you.
oh no, I really mean it. Like I said in emails and that, I'd love to have you back on, and just to talk a little bit more. You're very easy to talk to, and very, very intellectual and educational as well. And this has been the fastest hour I've had in a long, long, long time. That's no disrespect to any other podcast guest. It's just that I've been engrossed by this one. This is right up my street. Uh, Sarah,
Brilliant.
from
Thank you.
messaging me and organizing this podcast, and booking yourself in really fast, and now doing the episode. Just thank you so much. Honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Borderline podcast tonight. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Andrew. And yeah, look forward to speaking to you again.
Yeah, definitely. We'll definitely have you back on in the future. There's no doubt about that. Well, guys, that's it for tonight's episode. I'm sure this has been an absolute banger for you. There's so much information in this one, so many good messages, and as always, what I'll do is I'll put the links in the episode description at the bottom. If you'd like to get in touch with Sarah and finding out a little bit more about how remedial hypnosis might help you, then you have the evidence firsthand that Sarah is exactly where I'd be going if I need to if I need to get hypnotized. Put it that way. You've been absolutely amazing. So thank you again. Thank you so much. And from Sarah and myself, Andrew Willix, this has been the Borderline Podcast. Good night.
Good night.